I just read the first 120 pages of this book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Let's talk about it. Even if you haven't heard of Henrietta Lacks, there's a chance that you might not be alive if it weren't for her. This is true in a sort of metaphysical sense, in that you might not be alive if your ancestors had not been saved by the polio vaccine that was widely distributed because of Henrietta Lacks's cells. But it may also be true in a literal sense. Some of the techniques of in vitro fertilization were developed using Henrietta Lacks's cells, which, to be clear, was done without Henrietta's knowledge herself or without the knowledge of her family after her death. The cells were taken from her body during treatment for cancer. That treatment, incidentally, left her infertile, but none of the doctors had disclosed to her that that treatment was going to do that. As you are undoubtedly aware, forced sterilizations are just one component of the complex history of eugenics that we have in this country. Whether that is direct experimentation, such like the Tuskegee experiments that you're undoubtedly aware of, or less direct but just as pernicious effects of maternal mortality gaps and fetal birth weight gaps, which we have discussed in other videos. This to say nothing of the genocide that our country was founded on, and the Nazi philosophies that were pioneered here and then taken by Germans. It just occurred to me that I shouldn't assume that you know what the Tuskegee experiments are. What were those? What am I talking about? The Tuskegee experiment, in short, was an experiment that was done by white doctors using black patients in the United States of America. The doctors deliberately infected black men with syphilis in order to watch the progression of the disease. The people were mostly unaware of what was going to happen to them. The true moral dark spot of these trials, was that it was discovered that penicillin would be able to save all of their lives, but the doctors withheld that information and withheld penicillin in order to watch the progression of the disease. It's truly one of the dark spots in American medical history. A parallel gray spot was that after Henrietta Lacks's cells had been taken and were being used to help spread the polio vaccine and save lives around the country, black scientists, technicians, and doctors were employed to do this process of cultivating and culturing Henrietta Lacks's cells. They were doing life-saving work with her stolen cells that were taken without permission. I don't have all the context of this photo, so I'm not sure whether it was taken as a sort of pat on the back, look at us, we hired black technicians to work in our labs, or it was taken in good conscience to sort of spread the idea that we could in fact hire black people for these positions. I don't know, but there is something devastating about this particular image. I'm just going to read you a quote because that's the best way to do this. Soon, the New York Times would run pictures of black women hunched over microscopes examining cells, black hands holding vials of HeLa, the cells, and this headline: Unit at Tuskegee helps polio fight. Corps of Negro scientists has key role in evaluating Dr. Salk's vaccine. HeLa cells are grown. That's the end of the headline. Continuing the quote: black scientists and technicians, many of them women, used cells from a black woman to help save the lives of millions of Americans, most of them white. And they did so on the same campus and at the very same time that state officials were conducting the infamous Tuskegee syphilis studies. I don't know about you, but it feels to me like an important piece of medical history that millions of American lives were saved by Henrietta Lacks's cells. Not cells that she gave knowingly, but cells that were taken from her body. It is a correspondingly important fact that you don't even need to read the whole book to see. You can just look at the dust cover on the back, which says that while millions of lives were being saved and billions of her cells were being sold for profit, Henrietta Lacks's family didn't even have access to the health care that was being derived from her stolen tissue. This parallels a reality we see time and time again. The first artificial hearts were tested and refined on Black patients who died in the process. Once they were perfected, they were too prohibitively expensive for Black Americans to even access. And as nice as it would be to think of this as something that happened in the past, it is still ongoing. Dorothy Roberts' work gives us many, many more details of this that I don't have time to talk about in this particular video. Except, I suppose, to say that we think of genetic science as moving forward into the future. As we are getting better and better with our DNA sequencing, it seems like we're finding our way towards a more objective definition of race. If that intuition feels correct to you, I implore you to check out this book, Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts. In fact, our contemporary pharmaceutical tools and our contemporary structure of racial capitalism is creating race in a way that I know feels like that can't possibly be right, but read this one. Sorry, I'm getting off track because all these books are brilliant. Let's just sort of tie this up and wrap up this video for a bit. I am about 1/3 of the way through this book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I will leave links to it in the places where the links go if you want to read the last 2/3 along with me. But I would venture to say this. If you do not want to read hundreds and hundreds of pages of the history of eugenics in the United States, and you don't want to read hundreds of pages about the history of experimentation on African Americans, and you want to read one sort of self-contained book that hits a lot of the core ideas in a broad overview sort of sense with enough specifics that it's worth the time and not watered down, I can really easily recommend this book, despite the fact that I'm only 1/3 of the way through it. I'll keep covering this as I read it in shorts and long-form videos. I also, just for what it's worth, also am, as I'm reading this book, continually thinking of Dr. Delston's book, Medical Sexism, which I'll be covering in the next set of videos after this. I'm Charlie. This is That Makes Sense to Me. Thanks for reading along with me and watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye.